I think it's just getting the reps in having a W-2, like we talked about, having a family and having other responsibilities that I have. It's just finding the time to get enough dials in and get enough conversations in. And that's really what it's all about is you're going to get to a certain point where you're proficient enough to run a business. The more dials and the more conversations you can have and the quicker you can do that, the quicker that business will take off. And I think it's just a numbers game and it's just a practice and proficiency. But getting to that point is where you just have to put the reps in. And so for me, it's finding the time. And I work with Chris a lot on this is where do I find time in my day to break away? Is that after work? Is that on weekends? Where is it that I can find the time to get those reps in?
Welcome everybody to Real Estate Junkies Coast to Coast. I'm your co-host, Rusty Ham, on the West Coast. Rick, you're on the East Coast. Say hi.
Yep.
And we have a special guest with us today, Jeff Cody. Jeff is part of the Wicked Smart community. Jeff, say hi, and where are you from?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. So I live in
Southwest Florida.
Yeah, so
We're
Fort Myers,
covering all
Naples.
corners. Yeah, we're covering all corners of the U.S., Southern Cal, Southern East, and then the Northeast. Awesome stuff, Jeff. Let's dive into your past a little bit. Let's rewind it a little bit before you started the Wicked Smart community. Tell us just a little bit about yourself. You don't have to go all the way back to your birth.
Yeah. It would take a while.
Yeah, just kind of tell us who you are, where you're from, what did you do in the past, and then what led you to our community.
Yeah, I've had a pretty varied career history. So I was in the military for a couple of years. I flew in the airlines for a couple of years and just got fed up with that and started thinking about what I would want to do long term. And I fell in love with real estate back from when I was a kid. And so I started looking back in 2002, 2003 for some investments. So I started looking back then. Me and a fellow fledgling pilot, he and I bought a place together and fixed it up. It was a live-in flip house hack. So we had a couple other pilots that would rent rooms from us when they were in town, and we made a ton of money. And so that was like my first good deal. So I got into real estate full time. I stopped flying, and that was in 2006, 2007. So I think we all know what happened then. And it got so bad that I had to go out and get a real world job. So I got into technology. I'd always been in love with technology as well. And so I've been in technology the last 15 years or so, and it's been great, but it took me away from real estate. And so about 5 years ago, I said, I'm getting older. I got to start thinking about retirement and what do I really want to do? And so that had brought me back in about 2020 that I started looking at it again. And so I started getting back in, trying some different things and fumbled around for a couple of years. And then last year found the Wicked Smart community and it's started changing things a lot.
Awesome. Yeah. So again, the three pillars are mindset, skill set, and systems. Let's dive into the mindset. You said you dabbled in real estate and you wanted to get back in it. What was it about this buying on terms that kind of attracted you? And then what's your ultimate goal? Because we always ask all these associates, why are you here? Big question.
Yeah. When I started looking at it again in 2020, I thought if I could just get a dozen rentals, I'd make enough money. I could then decide if I still wanted to work or not. And I quickly realized that rentals are pretty hard to cash flow right away, especially in a market where prices are increasing and rents are not increasing in line. And so maybe I'll do some flips and I'll lend on some projects. So I lent a pretty sizable amount on a project that we bought in 2021. We still own it today. So you can imagine the return on that is no longer there. So I lost money on that deal. I did a flip on my own. We got hit by a hurricane. As I was finishing that flip, ended up losing some money on that deal. And so I said, all right, the problem with those deals I realized was I didn't source them. I didn't think those were great deals. At the time, they seemed like good deals. I said, all right, let me start focusing on me finding the deals. And if I can find a good deal, I can do whatever I want with it. I can wholesale it or keep it. And so I started getting into the world of wholesaling and trying to be a deal finder and started doing that. But then you realize the downside of everything as you start getting into it. You need a lot of deals. You need a lot of time to find leads, to be able to find enough wholesale deals to really build a business. And I think that has served me well because I started talking to sellers a lot more and stuff. but that's a job. And I found Chris on a podcast talking about 3 paydays. And I'm like, all right, I like this idea. And so I started getting into it a lot more. And last summer, I started talking to Chris and came to one of the live events in August, which was a in the trenches boot camp. And that really sealed it for me.
Nice. Rick, you were a wholesaler there for a bit, weren't you?
Uh, Tried to. Yeah, Jeff said it's another job, and it takes a lot to get a deal. And what you get a $5,000 or $10,000 wholesale fee, especially in the market, and you're not flipping, so you're the buyers, which were other investors that were flipping. Some of them, they don't leave enough. You've got to make it. You got to leave enough meat on the bone for you to profit. But you're always seeking that next deal. Jeff said you've always got to keep that pipeline going.
Yeah. And what I heard from Jeff just briefly is that you invested money, you put money into a project. It didn't go well for whatever reason, hurricane, all that kind of stuff. So you put money into, like, you get a loan, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I had some cash available in an account that I said, you know what, if I can put this in and get a small return and at least start getting into real estate, let me do that. And
Yeah. So I hear you. It sounds like your why is you don't necessarily want to be involved in a W-2 anymore. Does that sound accurate?
yeah, I think we all would love to be our own boss. And like I said, I'm getting older and I want to think about what do I want to do for the next chapter of my life. And I think I'd rather have my own career, my own business, call the shots, work the schedule that I want to work, make the money I want to make. You can't do that with a W-2.
Rick, you're right. We're both right there. I was a full-time teacher. I was tenured. They couldn't fire me unless I murdered somebody. It was just impossible. So I had a job security for sure, but I was miserable, right? Actually, I was not there. Now, Rick, I think you agree that our lives are it's so much better that we just have our own business, have our own time that we can manage.
Yep. It's just a feeling of much more freedom, even though at times coaching, as you and I do, Rusty, it takes a lot of your time, but it's very enjoyable and you're learning the whole time, even when you're coaching.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm still learning. I always ask Chris certain things, just like the other day, Rick, we asked him about pre-foreclosures and stuff. We had a question on that. And short sale. We didn't have a question. So we're still learning as coaches. Jeff, let's get into kind of the skill set. You said you had some real estate experience. Obviously, you've talked to sellers before. You've done deals before. What's the difference between that and the terms? And speaking to sellers about terms, kind of describe that.
Yeah, I think there's some nuances when you're talking to sellers about selling on terms that you just have to understand a little bit differently. It's not, do you want to sell? Okay, what's your price? You have to really understand their motivation to know if this could be a good fit for them. And then if it is, what is it that's going to make it a win for them? And I think that's the most important thing that you guys have helped me start uncovering with sellers is it the price that is most important to them, or is it spreading out the payments? There's a lot of benefits that can be there for the sellers. It's just, we have to figure out what's best for them to make it a win.
Yeah. And again, you're asking sellers to allow you to take over their home for a period of time, right? They have to wait for their money, which not a lot do. And that's why one of our first questions is, hey, do you need it or want it right now? And if they don't, then there's a solution for them where we are educating them on that solution, right? Rick, I don't know if you want to add anything onto the skill set part of it.
So far, Jeff, what have you found be most challenging in improving on to get the skill sets?
I think it's just getting the reps in having a W-2, like we talked about, having a family and having other responsibilities that I have. It's just finding the time to get enough dials in and get enough conversations in. And that's really what it's all about is you're going to get to a certain point where you're proficient enough to run a business. The more dials and the more conversations you can have, and the quicker you can do that, the quicker that business will take off. And I think it's just a numbers game and it's just a practice and proficiency, but getting to that point is where you just have to put the reps in. And so for me, it's finding the time. And I work with Chris a lot on this is where do I find time in my day to break away? Is that after work? Is that on weekends? Where is it that I can find the time to get those reps in?
Right. And I know in working with other associates and myself that in Rusty and I both experienced it, is if it's important enough to you, you find the time. It's just coming up with the solution to find that time. And I know Chris had us do the 15-minute drill, right? Every 15 minutes, write down what you've done during the day. It does take a lot of time, but you do it over a week and then you look back over it and you look at, wow, I can really get more time than I thought I did.
Yeah. So describe that, Jeff, because you recently posted it, right? And we looked it over. Describe that every 15 minutes and the impact it had on you. And it had a big impact on me. I was like, okay, I'm wasting time here. I'm wasting time there.
Yeah, exactly.
So describe that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting points that I found with that exercise. The real result that we want from that is that you have somebody look at it that is an outsider, like you guys or Chris, and say, hey, do you really need to be spending time here? And Chris pointed out a couple of those things recently, and all valid points. And to your point, Rick, it is an exercise that takes some time and it takes some focus. You have to do it every 15 minutes. You got to log the time. And I found myself a couple times just getting into a project at work or something where I look back and I'm like, oh man, where did an hour go? And I got to think about what I did for that hour. But I think going through the exercise in itself made me really think about what I'm doing right now. Is that really helping me achieve my goal? Or am I just finding things to keep me busy, which we do a lot of times?
Yep.
We call that competing commitment, right? You have, I'm supposed to make dials here, but then I have laundry. And which one's the easiest? Just sticking clothes in the laundry is a lot easier than making phone calls.
Creative avoidance.
That's the one that's the easiest. Let's go back to your skill set on the phone. Describe an objective that spooked you, that just totally stumped you. And then what things did you do in order to get over that objection with the seller? Did you utilize your coach? Did you record it, send it in, get a critique? Did you reach out to anybody? What objection was it? And then what did you do in order to get over that?
Yeah, I would say that a couple objections I get most often would be A, why do I want to wait for my equity? Or B, I'm older. I don't know that I can wait for my equity. And I would not have known how to answer those questions until I got into the community and started going through the scripts and talking to you guys. And like you said, I'll send in calls into our Slack channel to have you guys review and just help get an outside perspective on, did I answer this correctly? Did I solve the challenge for the seller or not? And if I didn't, what can I do next time? And then I'll take some notes. You guys will put in notes and I'll go back and I'll listen to it and I'll read the notes as I'm listening to it. And I'll do that with other associates too. I'll listen to their calls and look at your comments and say, okay, next time that comes up in one of my calls, I know now what to say. And it's just the repetition and the practice. And I'd say the other thing that has been really good for me is there's multiple courses within the Wicked Smart community that have live seller calls that we can listen to for training. And so in the QLS program itself, but also in the seller specialist program, and then in our scripts and dialogue channel within the Slack channel, there's tons of recorded calls. And there's nothing better than getting on and listening to you guys or Chris or Zach making calls with sellers and just understanding. A lot of times it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. And that's the one thing we all have to understand. And that's been really helpful, is to hear them go through it versus just reading it.
And you mentioned QoS, and Rick, I know you want to jump in here real quick. I just want to remind everybody, QoS is the Quantum Leap system. It's our home study course. Again, if you guys want to check that out, you can just go to the show notes. We do have a link to, if you want to check out the QoS home study course. Rick, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jeff, what you just said was key in how you say it. I have a couple of virtual assistants, VAs. One of them she's going on 3 years with me now. She's very advanced now, but I've spent a lot of time with her. The first 3 months or so came across, she had sellers give her a hard time, and she came across very scripted. And I told her she's very personable and everything else. And she always talks about family and everything. I said, talk to the seller like you're talking to your family member, your neighbor. And she did that, and everything just turned around like that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Jeff, let's pivot to systems now. I'm assuming coming into it, you didn't have a CRM. Maybe you did. I'm just assuming that, but because a lot of associates that come in, they're brand spanking new. I didn't have anything. It was just paper and pencil.
Mm.
Now we have Mojo Dialer, we have REI Blackbook, we have all these systems. So what did you start out with? And then now what do you have now?
Yeah. So I had, before I got into the community, I had started building up the wholesaling part of it, and I don't have the time to do enough dials. And so I had hired a virtual assistant before I got into the community from recommended by another program, really pricey, really expensive VAs. They were good, but it was very expensive. And we were just calling lists that I would just download. They probably weren't the best lists, and I was paying a lot of money for that. And in order to do that, I needed Mojo, and I had like phone.com to connect through to get the phone numbers and stuff like that. So I had a couple of things lined up that when I came over to the community, that made it a little bit easier. I had been using Mojo just as a basic CRM where I'd be able to track some things. But I got in the community and started getting in with you guys and learning what the CRM that you guys use that everybody helps build up with workflows and different activities that you can do inside the system. That has been a real game changer for me. Continuing to learn. I think I hadn't spent a ton of time in it at the beginning, which is probably good. And I'm just leveraging people like Rick and some of the VAs that have been in the system a lot to help me just tweak things, because I don't want to spend the time doing that either.
Very often people, when they're starting, there's distractions that take away their dialing time. And so they'll sit there and they'll say, I really don't want to dial. Let me work on the REI Black Book. And they'll spend the whole day working on that, all their free time. And that'll go on for a week. And that's not what's making them money. We always encourage them to spend your time on the most profitable activity first.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's just, they're so afraid to get on the phones and get rejected by sellers. It's a lot easier just to dabble into a CRM and try and figure that out, right?
Yeah.
They do things that's easiest for them. So good stuff, Jeff. Let's get into our game plans. Again, the 4 game plans that we typically use as our transactions are lease purchase, owner financing, subject to buying the house, subject to the existing mortgage, and then an executive lease purchase and or an assign out, where we find the buyer and we assign it back to the seller. Jeff, you've been kicking butt. You just got, I don't know, your first or second deal, right? So you got first deal, and then you got a lot in the hopper, as the Northeasterns like to say it. Describe your first deal. Where did it come from? The source, and then the motivation of the seller, and then what kind of deal was it?
Yeah. So I've got a VA now that I've been using within the community. They use our scripts. They do a great job. They use some of the lead sources that you guys have helped identify. And this one in particular was an expired lead. This woman had a couple of condos that she owns here in Florida, free and clear, and had tried selling them. They just hadn't sold. So it had expired from the realtor's listing. So my VA had called her and she said, yeah, I've been trying to sell this one. I'm open to other ideas. So the VA had opened the door to a creative financing type solution. And she was open to it. So I called her, and super nice, really open to the idea. And I think you mentioned it was free and clear. And so it seemed like a really good owner finance type situation. That's where we started. Yeah. So that's where we started with the conversation with her. And I had one of the other coaches on, Mike, helped me do a couple of calls with her. And one of her big sort of challenges was the capital gains piece. She was going to have to pay some taxes on it because it was a property she had not lived in. And when we started talking through it, she said, I'm going to have to pay capital gains tax on it. I'm not sure I want to do that. And Mike helped me pivot to a lease purchase, which she was a lot more interested in, which for us it's all good. That's a good deal for us as well. So that's how we locked it up, as a lease purchase.
Yeah. So again, for those listeners, lease purchases, we're going to agree on a price. We're going to agree on a length of term with the seller. We're going to lock in their equity, and then on or before that term is over, we're simply going to cut them a check for their equity and then pay off the remaining balance of the loan. Rick, do you have anything to add on his deal? And do you have any questions that you have for Jeff on that one?
Yes. With the capital gains, did she not want to spread the capital gains out, which is typical for an owner finance deal?
Yeah, I think she wasn't quite sure about it. I don't think she really understood that it would be spread out and maybe it wouldn't be such a big implication to her. But in the conversation, the lease purchase came up and she said, I like that idea. Let's talk about that some more. So it was just something that appeared.
Yeah. So a couple of episodes ago, we talked about owner financing, right? Where title doesn't necessarily have to transfer, right? If the seller is spooked by giving up title and giving up ownership, then you can do what Jeff did, which is, hey, let's do a traditional lease purchase because of the capital gains issue. Again, we're not CPAs. We want to make that very clear that we're not CPAs. So I'm sure that the seller got advice from their CPA and said, hey, you might have some more gains issues here. So you might want a shorter term. So you did a lease purchase, right? Which is typically a shorter term, because what we're going to do on the other end is you're going to find that tenant buyer. You're going to stick them in there probably for 2 years. So this is a perfect situation. It's your first deal. You're not necessarily tied to the home, right? You don't have ownership. You will be clouding the title. So you're basically working as a partner with the seller and just making sure that she gets what she wants. And then you're going to get your 3 paydays. So what's the price of the home, or what are your 3 paydays and what's your projected if it goes the full 30s?
Yeah. So she was trying to sell it at 265. I think she realized that she wasn't going to be able to. She was having a hard time. There are a lot of condos on the market down here, which I think can be good for us. But as we talked about it, she was okay taking 250. So we got it under contract with her for 250,000. The goal is to sell it for 279.9. And in the meantime, when we find that tenant buyer, we've got it out for rent right now at 1950. Our payment to her is 1840. There's a little bit of spread there. If we have the buyer take over the taxes, that's about 300. So there's a little bigger spread. And the good thing is the principal pay down, we negotiated with her. We ideally want all of our payment, because it's free and clear. We'd love to have all of our payment go to principal pay down. But she said, I've got to cover my expenses. So there's about $900 for insurance and taxes and things. And I want some profit. And so we worked it out with her where $510 a month of our payment to her would go towards our principal pay down, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
And so if it went the full 48 months, we'd make a good profit there, about 24,000. Premium on the price, about 30,000. If we were to get the about 10% down payment, that'd be about 28,000. And so altogether, if it went the 4 years, I have it calculated at 74,000 for all 3 paydays.
Yeah, about average in the community, right? So think about it. And then how much money did you invest in this house? Let's talk about the investment part, because we talked about it in the very beginning, right? You would invest money of your own money, lots of money, to get these houses under contract, flip them, and then you had things happen. So you lost money, right? So just competitive how much you put into this house and what kind of return that is.
Yeah, I don't know that you could factor it. No, we didn't put any money into this one. So this is a deal that was just $0 down to her. We're going to make the monthly payments to her. We're going to pay her out over time. And she was okay with that. I've done these couple of deals before where I put in 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, and lose all of it. I put 0 in, I'll get 75 grand almost. It's a no brainer.
Right? Yeah. So talk about that. And people are just amazed, like this, their eyes are just like wide open. You're like, wait, is $10 for consideration, right? There's a $10 thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're making almost 75K on a $250,000 home. It's just incredible. The return on your investment, which is almost nothing. It's infinite, which is awesome. What are your thoughts on that? You don't have.
USB.
I say, yeah. What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, you can't get that annual raise. But it's the same with all the deals I've had. Some of them I have put money down because the seller needed some money to move or something like that, but it wasn't a large amount. But yeah. So Jeff, I guess the question I'd ask for you, what's been your biggest takeaway in doing this deal?
I think for me, when we talk to people that don't know about terms, the question they always have is, how do you convince somebody to do this? And what we've what we always say is you're not convincing anybody to do it, but you're finding a solution to help them solve the challenge that they have. And for her, she's got 4 properties. She was just done renting them. It was a hassle for her. Oh, it was fine. It was making her money, and they were, it's just a hassle. She wanted to go travel and she wanted to do things and not have to worry about these places. So for her, it was solving that challenge, getting her a good price. The market's not super hot for condos right now. So she could have waited months and not sold it. So for her, just solving that challenge for her, I think was great. But at the end of the day, we're not trying to convince anybody why this is the best thing for them. We're just trying to find those people that it makes sense for. And that's why it takes repetitions and it takes a lot of work and it takes some conversations to find those people that say, you know what, that sounds like an idea. Tell me more. And that's all we want.
Yeah, and one of the fascinating things, and I was on another podcast Friday, and they'd asked me a few questions about how much did you put down and how much did you make? It was a 6-figure deal, and I put $10 down. And not only did I make 6 figures, the seller got their full asking price, and a buyer got into a home they wouldn't have been otherwise able to get into at a fair price. So how does that work? It's almost out of thin air.
Yeah. Good stuff. You mentioned earlier, Jeff, and we'll glide into the end on this. You mentioned in August, you went to the In the Trenches boot camp. Describe your experience, some ahas like Rick says, and some takeaways from that. And how did that propel your business moving forward?
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Chris in early August and really enjoyed talking with him, learning more about the community and starting to listen to a lot more of how you guys do things. And I know you guys were up in the Northeast, and I said, man, it's a shame. I'm going to be in Boston next week. It's a shame there wasn't something going on where I could come meet with you guys. And he said, when are you going to be here? And I told him, and he said, oddly enough, we've got it In the Trenches boot camp next week. And I said, all right, I was going to come up on Thursday. I had to be in Boston anyway on a Friday. I said, I was going to come up Thursday night. Why don't I come up Tuesday night? So I came up Tuesday night. We spent Wednesday. The big thing I'll say is the first day of the boot camp, you guys are making calls for us, right? And that was the big thing for me. I had a lot of leads, but I wasn't able to close them, and I wasn't quite sure where to take them. So I brought a list of leads and phone numbers with me, and I sat with Chris and a couple others, and he just made calls, and we got a couple of people really interested. And so that first day I left with a handful of like live deals that could have gone. And so then the next day we structured them out. Okay, how would it look for the seller? What would we pay them? What would we make? We worked through all the structure of the deal. And then these guys were ready. So we presented that to these sellers, and that was amazing. So that was Thursday. And then, like I said, I had to be in Boston Friday morning. So I missed the third half day, which you guys can touch on, which is I did afterwards to help me understand what are the KPIs that I needed to hit my goals. So for me, it was a real kickstart to the business, which was super exciting for me.
Yeah. And what was nice was, although you missed that session on Friday, Zach did a one-on-one strategy call and recorded it. So everybody can see what really goes on during a strategy session.
Yeah. And then Jeff, you probably know we're in the community. Rick is putting something together to start doing more strategies to get people to see the big picture. There's a lot of people like you, they don't want to be in their W-2 anymore. So, we're going to structure something if you are truly serious, again, we're working with the dedicated and serious to get out of their W-2 and make this their lifestyle, then here's and then it's going to be a blueprint. Like, here's what your numbers you're going to need in order to get rid of that. So that's good stuff. And I think, I think Jeff and Rick, I think you guys would agree that strategy session with Zach, hey, this is what we need to be doing with more people, right?
Yeah. It's when you say we find out what everybody's why is, and then set apart some goals for them. And then we figure out, okay, how many deals based on numbers we know from KPIs, key performance indicators, what it's going to take to get that deal and how much that deal is going to be worth for a given area. And then we break that down into, okay, to get that deal, how many offers do you need to put out? How many appointments do you need to go on to get that number of offers? How many leads do you need to have to get that number of appointments? And all the way down to how many dials a day you need to do. So it's very predictable.
Yeah, so good stuff. And again, we have those links in the show notes, the QOS homestead course. If you want to dabble in the trenches boot camp, you can click on that link. We've talked about it on multiple episodes. It's very powerful for people that join or that go, right? Because they just see us in action. We're living what we preach, right? We're in the trenches, right? We are there for you, with you, and working every deal. Like you just said, you didn't get this lease purchase on your own, right? You had help, and Mike walked you through everything to get that deal. And then now it's just going to be $75,000 deal. So great stuff. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week on our calls. Rick?
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Take care. We'll see you guys next week.
All right. See you, everyone.